Well, folks, I'm sure all of you can remember exactly where you were when you heard the news of Sandy Hook. I know I'll never forget it because I'd actually went out of town with my soon-to-be second wife, and we went to Cherokee, North Carolina, and I proposed to her and I asked her to marry me that day. When we got done with that, we drove away from the waterfall where we were at and drove back into the town. Now, I've not been to Cherokee in years, but back then the only restaurant that was there was a Bojangles, and that's a chicken shack for those of you that have never been to one or don't have those in your part of the world. And we walked in there to get us something to eat, and that's what was on the news. And I'll never forget sitting there watching that on the news and the way that it stung when I realized that these were kindergartners. At that time, we had heard a whole lot about high school shootings. Not that either one is a good thing or that one's better than the other, but I just remember the sick gut feeling that I had in my stomach thinking about kindergartners and how terrible it was. And if you'd have told me all those years ago that we would still be in this boat today and we'd still be talking about it, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have thought that we would have been able to put our political differences aside and rolled up our sleeves and worked on this issue. But it seems like now we're more divided than ever. And it seems like now they're just becoming part of our normal everyday conversation. And one of the saddest parts to me is when you're having a conversation about one to somebody and you tell them about one and they don't know the one you're talking about, but then they tell you about one they heard about and it's one you knew nothing about. That should have never happened in this country, but because we have politicians like J.D. Vance who wants to say, well, that's just a fact of life, and we got people like Tim Burchett here in Knoxville that says, well, you can't fix it. We ain't going to be able to fix it. That's why we're still in this boat. And I'll be brutally honest with you, I've lost so much respect for people who have entertained the conspiracy theories. I can be talking to someone, and if they go down into a rabbit hole talking about Sandy Hook and believing the stuff they heard on InfoWars, any respect I had just goes straight out the window. But I'm going to read you this article here from Midas Touch. This was written by Troy Matthews. He points out that the kindergartners that survived back nearly 12 years ago, they're going to be voting in their very first election, and a lot of them are leaning toward Kamala Harris. So we're going to read this article here. And again, this is from Troy Matthews from the Midas Touch Network. First graders in Sandy Hook shooting now old enough to vote in first election. Survivors at the Sandy Hook school shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, which took the lives of 26 people, including 20 kindergartners, were just 6 years old when that shooting took place. They are now high school seniors and are preparing to vote in their very first election. Grace Fisher survived the massacre by sheltering in place in a dark classroom while her teacher quietly read the Nutcracker. Now, nearly 12 years later, Fisher and her peers have hope for the future now that they finally have the ability to affect change. Folks, I can't imagine that a child ever had to endure something like that. And the fact that a teacher was sitting there reading that is just so heartbreaking, heartbreaking to read that. But right down here, it's a huge turning point in our lives, said Fisher. We were told this would be what turns everything around, said 18-year-old Emma Ahrens, who has had to watch school shooting after surviving her own. Despite being near the shooter when he shot her classmates, it really breaks your heart a little more every time. Both Fisher and Ahrens, along with two other classmates, told NBC they plan to vote for Kamala Harris. It's a no-brainer for me, said survivor Lily Wasselnack, I guess they say that, also 18. Folks, I just can't imagine surviving something like that. That's something we don't talk about enough, is the survivors who survive these types of things, and then they have to relive it every time it happens. If you could imagine how bad it stings us just to hear about it, imagine the trauma that it brings back to the children who endured it. It's such a shame that we're at this place we're at in this country. But the teens first met Vice President Harris at the White House on National Gun Violence Awareness Day on June 6th as they were preparing to graduate high school. They shared their individual accounts of the shooting with Harris, who thanked them for their courage. None of you should have had the experience that you've had at all. You guys know that you guys are moving the needle. And here's a tweet that Kamala put out talking about what J.D. Vance had to say. School shootings are not just a fact of life. It doesn't have to be this way. We can take action to protect our children, and we will. And I'm not even going to hit play on that video. I'm really tired of hearing that sick fuck even say these things. But Harris plans to prevent gun violence which is the largest killer of children in the United States, is to ban military-style assault rifles and high-capacity magazines and to require background checks for all gun purchases. By contrast, Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, recently said at a rally that school shootings are simply a fact of life. I don't want my kids to go to school in a place where you feel like you have to go have additional security, but that is increasingly the reality that we live in. What's a reality we live in because of people like you who cling to your guns and will not listen to any voice of reason, will not try to compromise at all. It is only a fact of life in a country that permits nearly unlimited civilian access to high-powered military-style rifles. This does not happen anywhere else on the planet, and yet J.D. Vance and Republicans in Congress still refuse to take even the most basic action on common-sense gun laws, despite overwhelming majorities of Americans being in favor of such laws. It has been less than 2 weeks since the shooting in Appalachia High School in Georgia, which was the 23rd school shooting in the United States in 2024 that resulted in an injury or death. The 23rd one, and we ain't even done, folks. This has just gotten so far out of hand. But if there's any silver lining in this horrible dark cloud that we live under, it's that these children are now old enough to vote, and they've lived a lifetime of being reminded of their trauma every time they hear the news of another one. My heart truly does go out to them. It's really tough to even talk about this because it's just so ridiculous that we're still having this conversation and that no one can find common ground when it comes to our children. That's the part that I will never understand. But these children have been having to live through this ever since that day, and so many children around this country have to relive it every time they hear the news. But they're going to grow up, and they're going to be old enough to vote, and they're going to remember the politicians who told them it was just a fact of life. They're going to remember the politicians who said, we can't fix it, there's nothing we can do about it. And they're going to remember Donald Trump bragging about how he did nothing. And I'm not even going to play the clips of Tim Burchett again or Vance or Trump and all the ones that have said these things because, folks, I'm tired of hearing their voice. And when it comes to something like this, I'm just tired. We know what kind of people they are. I don't feel like I need to remind you of it. So all I know to do is vote and encourage more people to vote and have hope that the kids as they grow up are going to be the ones to completely end MAGA once and for all. I really feel like it's in their hands when they have the opportunity to speak up and let their voice be heard. I don't see how you could survive a tragedy like that and then grow up to vote for anyone who said they couldn't fix it or bragged about the fact that they didn't. But again, my heart goes out to all of them and anyone who's ever had to survive something like that. And I really, I have to applaud the teachers who in that moment could stop to read a book to children or could stop to comfort the children. It's a place we should have never been in this country, but we're there. And I really hate when I'm having conversations with someone and they remind me of one that I forgot about. I feel guilty when I realize that there's one that I forgot about, but at this point, we can't remember them all. And that alone should be enough to stop everybody in their tracks and say, wait a minute, we got a problem. And to the party that wants to talk about being pro-life, you're not pro-life until you're willing to work on this issue. You can't be pro-life and value a gun more than a child. It's just not possible. So until they're ready to have the conversation, the rest of us are going to have to be the adults in the room, and we're going to have to keep moving this country forward. And I think the more of us that speak up and speak out, the children are going to remember who was on their side. They're going to remember the people who were speaking on their behalf when they were children and didn't have the voice yet to say anything and didn't have the voice to vote in elections. So I think it's very important that we stand up and talk about these things. And I know a lot of people are in situations with your job and your work where you can't put a lot of things on social media. I understand those situations. But you can pass stuff along to people in private. You can have conversations with people and try to move the needle forward. It was just one of those things that, if I'm being brutally honest, I don't ever say this in videos, but I kick myself in the ass all the time for not doing what I'm doing sooner. I have people say to me, because I was a musician for over 25 years, spent most of my life doing that. If you'd have told me 25 years ago, or if you'd have asked me, how's your life going to go? I'd have said, well, I'm just going to keep playing this music and keep hammering it home until someone hears it. And then I get discovered and I go out there and play my songs. But along the way, I always had it in my heart to be doing this kind of thing. I would be playing a gig in some redneck bar, and I'd be standing there going, "Damn, I want to talk about that." But at the time, I'm chasing the dream of music, which I always hated that phrase. I was living the reality of music, but I was playing in places where I was paid to entertain, and I believed in doing that. If someone was paying me to entertain their crowd, I didn't get on a bullhorn and talk politics. But I can't count the times that I walked off the stage going, "Damn, I wished I could have talked about that." Well, now I can, and I'm glad life turned out the way it did. I have all those life experiences under my belt, and I can definitely go back and talk about all the things that I lived through. I'm lucky. I'm really lucky that I didn't get shot in some of the places I played. I picked the absolute most dangerous places to play because I was like Hunter Thompson. I wanted to buy the ticket and take the ride. Um, but there's a part of me that says, "Damn, I should have gave up playing a Skinner cover a long time ago and sat down in this chair and started talking." So I'm doing it now, and I think more of us needs to speak up, speak out, and if you can't, share the videos and pass them around because this is our children we're talking about, and it's time that we all stand up for them. And it's long overdue that we go to bat and fix this problem. And I think when someone says, in my mind, like when Tim Burchett said, "Don't fix it," in a perfect world, someone with a straight jacket should have just come and got him and said, "You're done here, buddy. No one's ever going to forget what you just said. So since you don't have anything to add to this, we're going to try to talk with reasonable people that do." But folks, let's keep standing up for the children. Let's keep being a voice, and let's be glad that they're getting to the age that they can vote, because I really believe they're the ones that's going to put an end to this once and for all.